Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, let's start this Bava Batra daf Kuf. We are going to begin on Sadi Tes Amud Beis by the Mishnah at the bottom. Mi shahaisa derech harabim, or versal today. Let's say you have a public pathway that goes through your property, and maybe that's a little bit disturbing for you because you really would prefer it being somewhere else. So you came up with an interesting strategy. Natla, you took your path back, and you gave an area on the side for them to be able to pass through. So Masha Nasa Nasan, it's very nice. What you gave was a good gift. However, slowly Higiyu. But you're not able to take back that original path. That original path that belonged to the Rabbim, that you cannot take back. I think Mor is going to discuss exactly why that would be the case, but that is the psak. Okay, let's continue with the Mishnah. Derech Yachid, let's say you have a private area. Person sells, as Rashbam says, derech b'toich sedehu, a path on the road on his field. So the din is, it says Dal Amos Sarich Litin lo Dalad Amos Koroichav Agala. You need to give 4 amos, which is the width of a wagon. Derech Harabim, a path for the Rabbim, Sheish Esri Amma, 16 amos. As we are familiar, this is the amount as it's brought down with the Shabbos. Nafgalon Ma'agoles the Mishkan. When it came to the goals of the Mishkan, which there were 2 side by side, and they were calling the Karashim, as the Gemara there discusses, interestingly enough, on the same daf, Sadi Tes, but in a different Masechta. So again, you have to have the 16 amos, which of course is the definition of the width of Rishos Harabim street. Okay, so Sheish Esri Amma. Derech HaMelech Ein Lo Shir. However, when it comes to a king, because they have eminent domain, there is no shir, which basically means that he could take over as much space as he wants when it comes to traversing. As well as Derech HaKever Ein Lo Shir. Also, when it comes to bringing a mace to the basic varus, this is the Kanas Chaman, the Rashbam says, Mishum Yikrad to Shachve, to show covet mace. As the Gemara says in Masechtas Ksubas, the Strichim L'Avoiso Harbe B'nei Adam, a lot of people need to accompany and to eulogize Shiach Ziku Maloi Kol Derech Miavua An Sisra. Basically, you need to have this long amount of space. It says Rashbam Nir Be'enai Deha Ein Lo Shir the Mace L'Chomer Kederech HaMelech Lifritz Binyanim L'Hasim Mamoy Necherim. It doesn't mean like a king, he can knock down buildings and everything, but it just means that he has more space. You have like an endless amount of space to be able to have the mace. And then the Mishnah concludes, Hamaymid Daini Tzipayri Amru Base Arba Kabin. So they actually said it was a specific amount of space, but Ravua Tseil Omad Masayim B'Chatzar HaMishkan. Dahavi Me'al Chamishim. We know the Chatzar Mishkan was 100 by 50. Nimsa Beisa Chamishim al Chamishim. So that's therefore Sayim, 2 saw is 100 by 50. So therefore a saw is 50 by 50. Okay, so therefore that's what he says, that is the amount of space. Base Arba Ma'amid Sipori Amro Base Arba Kabin. For Kav. Okay, fine. So let's continue now with the Gemara. So for the Gemara, why do we say that he created this nice, beautiful new path? Why do we say that they get to keep their old path and that the new path doesn't help? Linkoid Pazra Velasiv. Why doesn't he like set up like some a stick over there? And so Rashbam says, "L'hakois es komi shirtzel labor." Levid did it in Avshe. He should be like a vigilante and not let anyone pass. And everyone tries to come, he'll give him a little hit with a stick. Shmami no oven inish did it in Avshe and he'll maka seda. This actually Gemara discusses elsewhere. This question whether or not a person is able to take the law in his own hands? Is he allowed to just simply say, listen, I'm losing money over here because I'm going to end up losing a pathway, so it doesn't seem very fair that this should be allowed. Says Rashbam, bin miya v'anan kaimelon b'babakama. We learned elsewhere, b'maniach kol yalma sabri avadinish dina lanashi b'makom dikab seda. Apparently, everyone holds over there that in the situation where there is a loss, then you could take the law into your own hands. So why can't he do that? So the problem is that this new pathway that he created may not be as good as the original one. It may be in a way that literally means like diagonal or crooked. Basically what it means is that maybe this new pathway that he created is not going to be as convenient as the original one, and therefore to inconvenience the Rabbim more than the way that they were doesn't seem right. He says it's actually maybe only in a situation where we could actually see that's what he did. Dav Kuf. Very interesting answer over here. Ravashi Omer Kol Min Hatzad Derech HaKolosain Hi. So it's always inconvenient. Even if, let's say, it becomes more convenient for one person, oh wow, now it's closer to me. But the truth is, if it's closer to you, then by moving the path this way, you made it more inconvenient for someone else. So since we're dealing with a Rabbim, you cannot inconvenience anyone, and therefore for that reason, you don't have the right to prevent people from going through. So v'leimu shilka did didi. Maybe he should say, give me mine back. Or in other words, why can't he reclaim the new path? If the new path is not good because it's more inconvenient, okay, fine. So then stick to what you had, and that's it. Okay, I made a mistake. I should never have made a new path. But the reality is, I shouldn't now have to lose out because I made this new path, which is inconvenient. Okay, I'll just take that back. So Hamani Rabbi Eliezer, the son Rabbi Huda Oimer Mishem Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbim Shiboyer Derech La'atzmam. When it comes to Rabbim who choose a path for themselves, Mashabar Baru, what they have chosen, they have chosen. Says Rashbam, therefore, Alpha B Shalom Natul Rishus Mabal Sada, even if, let's say, the owner of the field didn't even get permission, but just all of a sudden it's just the mob is going contiguously through a certain path that ends up becoming a path, and therefore you can't take it back. Rabbi Eliezer Rabbim Gazlan, who understand? So it sounds like if you didn't get permission, you went to through someone's field. Oh, so it's okay. What do you mean? That you're telling me that the Rabbim are thieves? That they're destroying, defacing someone else's property and trespassing? Actually, what happened was they didn't know any path. There was definitely a path, but it got lost, and therefore they were allowed to go through a person's field because it was definitely a path. We just didn't know exactly where it was, and then they created some type of new path, if you will. Says the Rashbam, and therefore the koyach of the Rabbim is stronger. When it comes to if you have rights to a path through someone else's field, and then somehow that path gets lost, that's it. You can't reclaim it or make a new one. Abul Rabbim ki based in damu. Based in is like a interesting enough language. They have the status of like the based in, and therefore they are able to reclaim a path. So, but maybe you're right. If there was never a path, it doesn't mean that they can just go into someone's field and just create a path. That's not right. But we're talking about there was already a right for them to do so, but they got lost exactly where it was, so then they can create it. Says the Gemara, we see that when it comes to a situation where the path is lost, we said the halacha is not like Rabbi Eliezer. Says the Rashbam, the din's with him. Even when it came to Chachamim who disagree with Admon over there, that you can get a path, or yifrach, take a path, or yifrach ba'avir, or literally fly up in the sky. So ha kimna, so we established that b'chad yasmik koyach arba. that a person who bought it from 4 different people, that there's the new landowner actually bought it from 4 on the paths which are on all 4 sides, and so it was originally owned by 4 different people. Now he owns the whole thing, and therefore in that situation he can say, I'm not gonna do this. This field, he definitely has to give him a pathway to go into the field. The Gabi Rabim, when it comes to the Rabim, dinhu sheim beru atzman, if they chose it for themselves, yafe asu, it's good. The kashal rab yomer ein halacha the rab de ukma kisha ave sha'abda. Okay, so man, it's back to the Gemara. So man masti lo masti ha. One who learned this didn't learn this. Rab Gidol, who learned in the name of Rab, who says that kagain sha'abda, that the path was lost. Lo masti ha di amarab Rav Huna amarab the ein halacha. So the one who learns one can't learn the other one. Okay, but time of my mishum de Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Yehuda meitzar shechzika barabim asol kalkulei. If you have a boundary or in which there's already chazaka among the rabbim, it's also to ruin it. Rabbi Lezer rabbim b'mai kanule. So the question is, how were they kaina this path? What exactly happened? Says Rashbam, a libid rabba bar Rav Huna. Do you remember ein halacha? The halacha is not like him. Umukilon, we applied it kishaloi abdul lehem derech, that the path was not lost. You feel hachikam Rabbi Lezer mashiber bayru, that they're still allowed to create that path. So apparently it's without any chazaka. So how are they able to make a kinyan over here? Answers behilucha. Just my mere fact that they walk through this path is enough. Just going through the length and the width, even though you actually didn't do anything necessarily to the field, you're still kind it because it shows an act. There's an act of acquisition by walking through these areas. It says no, you actually have to do something like plow the ground, or as we saw elsewhere, lock up a fence or put a breach in the wall. Those things are necessary. My time of the Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer asks, what's the reason of Rabbi Eliezer? Different people. So why does he say that hilucha works? Because the pasuk says in Bereshis, "Kum hisalach ba'aretz la'achru rachba," that Hashem told Avram that you should go and walk the length and the width of Eretz Yisrael, and that was like a way for him to be able to claim it. I think that's by Bris Ben Masarim. Kilucha nenu, because I'm giving you this land. Rabbanan, so we see hilucha apparently works. Rabbanan hasam mishum chivusa de Avraham hu de karmelei hachi. That's only because of the chavivus that Hashem had toward Avraham Avinu that he said this. Kadesha he noyach lichveish lifnei banav, that he should know how to conquer it before he builds it. Basic, says the Rashbam, dahavilhu kiyorshin. He's considered like an inheritor. V'lo kegazlanim, v'lo yeherishus l'satan l'katreg v'lo piskan pel l'bal midas adin. Okay, so basically, again, that he is able to go through this, but it's not because he stole the land. No, it's a Yerusha, and therefore this is a different situation, and therefore normally hiluch, just traversing through a land, is not going to constitute as a chazaka. However, they will agree, if we're dealing with a pathway of a vineyard, so when it comes to a karem, it does work. Says Rashbam, because derech hanos hamaisa kainanosai. So by even just getting the hana of going through that area of the vineyard is enough to create a kinyan, as it said in Cheskas Sabatim, Hetziam Atsois Benechse Hager Kana. Even spreading out some mats over there is a form of a kinyan. So even though it normally wouldn't be constituted as a chazaka because you're not necessarily fixing the land, but by when it comes to shvil kromim, hiluch does work. Kiyosla kamei the Rabbi Yitzchak barami amaruhu habule, give it to me kihechi the dari tuna disha bishasa. So in order for me to be able to load and carry my bundles and branches, Bahadar, and I'll return. Says the Rashbam, Havuli shvil rachav, give me the width of this path, kehechididari tuna dezimitis al ksefos. So this way I'll be able to have the branches on my shoulder to be able to go through here. Bahadar elach ve'elach, then I'll go in both directions. Lo yigu hazamaris mamchitzais hashvil, so that my branches are not going to hit either sides of the walls. V'loy amran, so basically that's how much space we want to make sure the path is. V'lo amran ella demisayam and mechitzasa. That's only if it's surrounded by walls, and therefore because of that you need to have this width so that you're not going to end up damaging the things that you're carrying on your shoulders. However, let's say there are no walls in that situation, so kihechi deshakil kara umanach kara. It's enough that you can put one foot and rest the other foot, which basically means you can have a much smaller amount of space. Says the Rashbam, lo yitin lo ella midrach kaf raglav. The amount of space all you have is just enough to walk. V'yizru hamoicher o yita karen mikan mikan. And the owner is able to plant and do everything he needs right next to it. To inkan davar hamazik, there's no walls there that are going to damage anything else on your shoulders because there's no walls. Hilkach yishom kot sarchay. But if there are walls, hadav yadua shlomachalo el shvil zeh kemo shehu. Okay. Vonihira diim shvil stam zavin lo lamule luyitain. Okay. Anyway, so that is the first piece. Let's look at question 6. Heim hilach moyel bataris kinyan karka. Is walking around help. So it's a machlokas Rebelez and Chachamim. However, as we said, b'karka ha'asuli hilach koyam makana. When it comes to land in which it's normal that is the way of its traversing, then it does work, which is referring to a shvil shel kramim. So that, because that's derech hilucha, so therefore that will work. Okay. Good. Let's continue. Derech hayachid daladam. So we said, when it comes to the pathway for an individual, you're granted 4 amos. We said that's the width of an angal of a wagon. Tana acherim oimrim kadei shiaver chamor b'masoi. Actually, the amount is just for a donkey with its bundles to be able to get through. Amar Abhuna halachach acherim. Tani idach tani golo oimrim shnei gemadim umechsa. What are gemadim? Rashbam says these are amos, katanos, small amos, mepirko ad etzba'oi, from your knuckles basically until your fingers. V'yesh amrim amos shleimus dekar ksiv goimid arka. So it's a gemed. The question is it a full amma? It's a little bit less than a normal amma, but basically let's just call it 2 amos, 2.5 amos. V'yamar Rav Huna halacha kedani goyla, v'yamar Rav Huna halacha acherim idi chad shiruhu. So some say it's actually the same measurement. In other words, when we said shnei gemadim umechsa, that's really the same amount of space of kedei shiaver chamor b'mashahu, which is 2.5 amos. Derech harambim sheish esrei amos, 16 amos for the when it comes to the rabbim. Tanaban derech hayachid arba amos, derech me'ir le'ir shmon amos. The path from going from one city to another city is 8, says Rashbam. Shaderech miyuchedes l'shtei yaros halol. There's a path which is designated to link these 2 cities. V'in anshi yaros acheres neknas l'mosham. So 8 amos. Why? Shem yivku shtei golos zumazu shel yisaku zumazu. You basically have to have a 2-lane highway. So if you have an agola, which is 4 going this way, and an agola going 4 this way, they can pass. If it's less than 8, and you have 2 wagons, you're stuck, because how are they going to be able to pass? So that's the reason why it needs to be 8. As we continue to Kuf Omid Beis, when it comes to Derech Harabim, as we saw in the Mishnah, Sheish Esrei Amos, 16, Derech Hari Miklat, Amos. Interestingly enough, we double it when it comes to the path for the city, to get to the city of refuge. The fact that it says it, Derech, then Haderech, basically we're doubling the road. So it's got to be double the size. A 32 Amos wide road. Derech HaMelech Ein Lo Shir. However, when it comes to the king, because as we said, because of the domain, he has unlimited amount. Shahamelech pirates gader laslis l'derech ve'in memachin biyadai. That he can basically do whatever he wants. He wants to knock down walls and everything, so then certainly he's allowed to. And as the Rashbam says, it's brought as a mission Sanhedrin ve'agav grora nakta b'masnisin. We already know this, but because we're mentioning all these other measurements of roads, so we mention the king as well. Derech keverin lashir mishum yikar de shachma, as we said, in order to show kavod hames, it would be a lack of respect if there's not a lot of space and not everyone can go to be malav the mace. Hamamid dainit sipoira omer dalad kabim chul. So we said it was 4 kabim tonaban. Hamoicha kivra, a person is burying. Hamoicha kivra, a person is selling a grave ma'arois hayoisin. That these were actually caves. Likvar sham mesi mishpacha. What they used to do, and we're going to see a picture of this on the next Amud tomorrow, that they would have special ancestral plots for burial, and the whole family would be buried basically together. So a person who sells this derech kivro, and you have to have certain paths to be able to get from one to the next. Makom Amadai, says Rashbam, Sha'im Dim Yoshim Sham. There has to be enough for you to stand and sit there, Samach Beis HaKavaris, near the cemetery. Fine. Ubeis Hespedoi, when it comes to the eulogy, Boyin B'nei Mishpacha V'Karbin Oiso Al Karcha Mishum Pagam Mishpacha. So we say that we allow people to go there. And even if it's against the will of the buyer, this is Takanas Chachamim, because of Pagam Mishpacha, says Rashbam, Genaihu Lehem Shein Lekroivim Makim Kvura. It would be embarrassing if there's no place for the Kvura. Hilkach Amar Banan Lishkol Demei V'Leheder. He can basically pay him back for this. Okay. So we again are lenient, and therefore the one who bought this property, he can't say no, you can't come here, but rather you are able to, and you would pay him the difference. Tanabanim. Ein poichasin meshiva mamanos moishavai slames. This is actually what we do bisman as well. Usually when we say the pasuk of Yoshev Seser Elyon, and then we get to Orech Yomim, that pasuk, the last pasuk, we say one word, and then we read the whole capital again, then we say Orech Yomim, etc., until we finish the whole thing. And we stop each time we get to the end of that paragraph. That's the minig of in my shul. Anyway, why do we do this 7 times? Keneged havel havolim oimer kehelos hakol havolim hakol havel, because it says the word hevel or havolim, which is 2, 7 times, and therefore to allude to the fact of the futility of life. Therefore, we want people to remember this, as the Rashbam says. Kachais and zayin palmim kedei loses el libam, to put into your heart shechaya adam hevel keneged shiva hevel havolim sheksum sefer bereish sefer kohelas. Okay, so that's the answer. The Rashbam gives another interesting reason. He says, the kein nira hatam be'enai v'isi kosam mipnei shashedim misalavim im hachayzim bebeis hakvaris ukach tiknu mamonos u'mashavos kadei shibatay kach yistalko hashedim aleihem, that the shedim should leave. Oh, okay. The rest of that Rashbam. Normally, Rav Achabar, Rebbe Rav Ashi. So heichi abdi. How exactly do we do this? How are they accustomed in a place they're annoyed to do this? Amalei kedesanya. Amr Behuda B'Rishaino Lo Hayu Paichasim Mishiva Mamadas Mishiva Umashavas Lames. They would not open these 7. Kigayin Imdu Yikarim Amoidu. They would say, what they would do is they would say, stand up, you honorable ones, stand. Shabu Yikarim Shevu. Imrulo, they would say it. So Im Kenaf Shabbos Matolasos Kain. If that's all you're doing, then that should also be able to be done on Shabbos. Says the Rashba. After they sat down, so that's what they would just say. That's all they would do. So he said, so the Chacham said, if that's true, then also on Shabbos, Heich de Kavuras Ameis, Samach and Chashecha. Obviously, doesn't mean we don't do a kavur on Shabbos. Once they do a kavur right before Shabbos, Yehim Mutter Lasos Kain Miachar Shlo Hayoisin Kim Amidus Yeshivo. So all you're doing is standing and sitting, but you're not actually doing much over there. So l'chayra, it should be allowed to be done. Okay. And we're knowing not to, we're also knowing not to do the Shiva Mamadois during Rosh Chodesh and other times. So Achte the Rami Bar Papa. So the sister Rami Bar Papa having it Sivale Rav Avia. So she was married to Rav Avia. Shechiva, she died, and Avin Lo Maimed Moshev. So he actually did this for her. So Rav Yosef Tabatarti. He made 2 mistakes. We only do the Amadois for the Krovi Hames. Says the Rashbam, Krovi Hames she'enim mis'albim boyim, people that are not mourning come, L'mamados u'mashavos u'kavod hames. V'hu avad afil b'ruchaykim. He did this even for people who were rachik, not relatives. He had everyone do this, which is interesting because the minig really is that everyone who is malav in the mace from the hearse to the actual kever, we all basically say it together. It should only be done on the day of the burial. He done on the 2nd day. He made actually another mistake. It's only done like our minhag is only in the cemetery. He did it in the city. Rabbi made a 4th mistake. You're only supposed to do it in a place where that's the custom, and he did it even in a place where it was not the custom. So these are 4 mistakes. Meisvei. We said you can do it on Shabbos. We're talking about in the cemetery on the first day is the only time you can do it. Basic verse Shabbos, my boy. What are you doing in the cemetery, right? So it must be really it's supposed to be done on the 2nd day. So as we said, no. Be'ir hasmucha basic varis diam tuhu ben hashmoshes. As we saw in the Rashbam, it doesn't mean that the burial took place on Shabbos. Obviously not. And we're talking about Yom Rishon, and what it means is it was done right before Shabbos. Right before Shabbos, because since the city is near the basic varis, as Shabbos is about to start in a few minutes, if you do this, you'll be able to still get back to your city. Says Rashbam, Diakati Yom Rishon, it's still the first day. The night is already considered to be the next day. Okay, we're going to stop here, but let's first see some questions. 7. Ma tiknu keneged shiva hevel havolim haksuvim beroish sefer koheles. So the shiva mamados moshavos bechazar min kever says when you return from the kever, which is interesting, is how the lashon is. We usually, what I've done is that we actually we're actually carrying the mace itself, the actual aron, and we stop the aron. Okay. Question 8. What were the 4 mistakes that he made? First of all, it's only done for kroivim. This also is only supposed to be done on the first day, done on the 2nd day. It should only be done in the cemetery, he did it in the city, and it's only makam shenagu, and he did this even a place makam sheloi nagu. Okay. Which is the same question as TA 24, which is always nice. So that was question 8 over here, which is the same thing as TA 24. And TB 25. Ma tiknu keneged shiva hevel havolim. So I wrote Amada v'hayeshiva kashem chayzer memes bebeis hakvoros. Adkan.